Tony Piccolo is the member for Light. Thanks for joining us on Flow, Tony.
Hello, Rick, and hello to your listeners.
Now, Tony, the Labor Party's had a lot to say in this state election campaign about health. It was understandable it was going to be a key focus after the COVID-19 crisis and ramping issues, but in your local region, which largely features Gawler, you've got some local announcements as well.
Very much so, Ricky. We've announced two key things to help with the ramping crisis which faces our state and also our local community. Firstly, we've actually announced 16 additional beds and the staff required to support those beds at the Gawler Health Service. And that's very important because ramping occurs when you just cannot get people through the D department. And so having additional beds and staffing will mean that you can actually process people more quickly through the emergency department and put them in the main part of the hospital. The other important thing we've also announced is an additional ambulance unit for Gawler. Gawler is a growing community, and at the moment with one unit, if our ambulance is actually somewhere else at the McQueen or Adelaide, we're not covered, and it has been a real problem. And in fact, I've actually personally witnessed where a person was hurt in Gawler, and they had to wait for over an hour for an ambulance to arrive. And fortunately, that person recovered, but it's certainly not good and certainly not meeting clinical standards in terms of response rate. So these two announcements are very important, but we're also going to refurbish the ambulance service in Gawler, and just to make sure we support our AMBOs and who are doing a great job in supporting our community.
Now, it's a rapidly growing area, the Gawler community and the northern Adelaide Plains. It's been targeted for some time by governments of both colours for urban growth. What role does the Gawler Hospital play, say, in the next 30 to 50 years in terms of being a hub for that sort of health issue, or is this a long-debated Barossa Hospital more likely to be that hub?
I think that both the health services of both the Gawler and Barossa areas need to be looked at. We've had a lot of talk from the other party, the government, about the Barossa. We understand that despite their 4 years in government, they haven't even purchased a site for the new Barossa Hospital, and they haven't actually published any reports, which they're keeping confidential in terms of what is required. So I think what we need to do is to step back and take a good hard look at what is required. You're quite right, Ricky, to raise the issue of the population growth, and what we need to do is work out what the needs are and how those needs are best served, and how those needs are best served in terms of both a hospital but an ambulance service, because hospitals and retrieval systems work together. What you can offer in one service will depend on what retrieval systems you have, and so we also importantly need to understand how the McQueen can actually operate as a backup service for this area as well.
Just a couple of other local topics. First of all, you've had some very colourful language regarding the Gawler line electrification and the closure on that. Have I got it correct? You've referred to it as a middle finger from the government towards the electors in Light?
Well, I mentioned that because the minister, in his usual belligerent way, when asked about, when is the when is the train going to come back, he's given two answers recently, which I thought were quite offensive and rude towards the community in Gawler. First of all, he said that the commencement day is academics, not important. And secondly, he's actually said when we last asked him, when we suggested that leaked documents suggested that it wouldn't be too late April, early May. And this was going back in December last year, he said that we picked that date out of our arse. And that was his answer. So, and as it turns out, we've been proven right. Sadly, we've been proven right. So it's those sort of comments which people locally take offence to, because he's actually given the political middle finger to people in Gawler. All he had to say, look, these are the issues, this is what we're doing. Engage the community. We know things can go wrong sometimes, but rather than be belligerent and offensive about it, just engage the community and explain. The reality is the project is 18 months late. This is just a construction phase, and also $227 million over budget. So the minister has to explain to the community why it's 18 months late and why it's $227 million, over time, over budget. So, and it's also his attitude to Northern Adelaide and the Gawler areas has been quite confrontational. In terms of the whole range of issues, in terms of substitute buses. He had to be dragged kicking and screaming to improve those services. and other projects are on time. Why is this project 18 months late? He says COVID. Well, other projects which he favours more have been delivered on time. Why is the north always the second, the distant cousin?
Well, just still on trains, I want to talk about floodplain management in a moment, but on trains, I think you've had a fair bit to say in recognising history about train services into the Barossa Valley. What is the Labor Party's position on returning even a tourist train from Gawler and out into the Barossa Valley?
We've publicly committed to, and in fact I had a discussion with the Shadow Treasurer just recently. We've publicly committed to actually funding a proper full feasibility to make sure that if a train, some sort of tourism train was to come back, it would be viable, and also to understand what needs to be addressed. The major complication we have, in terms of our commitment, is that we don't have details of what the agreement between the government and the company which actually leased the line are. We know that the lease has been modified since we were in government, so we're not sure what those terms and conditions are. So it is very hard for us to actually make a specific commitment. But the opposition has heard what people of businesses have said, that it would be a benefit to the Barossa, and so we're certainly happy to work with the winemakers, the small businesses, people, particularly the people in southern Barossa, and say, look, let's investigate this properly and work out what needs to be done and whether we can actually make it work, and how can the private sector also work and invest to make it work.
Okay, now just what we're seeing in television screens and elsewhere regarding flooding in northern New South Wales, southeast Queensland, and terminology being used like 1 in 1,000-year floods. Is the Gawler River region adequately prepared and got enough levee bank arrangements in place to make sure we don't have that sort of thing happen in your electorate and further downstream?
As far as I understand, my electorate itself is pretty okay. Certainly downstream, there's still some issues in both would be the seats of Frome and also perhaps a bit of Narunga and also Taylor. Those three seats probably be those lie-line areas. But I understand there is some plans about how to make the river system more efficient and to cater for more water and to sort of flow. And there is the Flood Management Board is looking at make some plans. That will require some funding by both the Commonwealth, state and local government to bring those additional works on. So, and I understand those discussions have been taking place. But as far as I can understand, that my immediate electorate should be okay. But you raise a very important point, Ricky, because what these floods also are showing is that the weather's become more unpredictable. It has become also more extreme, and so we need to take a serious look at what the impact of climate change and how do we plan for that, and how do we actually reduce emissions? How do we actually take preventive action so we don't have these types of weather activities? Rather than trying to actually stop the flooding, what we need to do is to actually improve our climate change policies so we don't have them in the first place.
All right, Tony Piccolo, we're out of time, but you've been generous with your time. Thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Thank you for your time, Ricky.